was law. And they believed that Nicholson had discovered a motionless Earth because he thought uh, his thinking of being a motionless Earth was based on his faulty apparatus, and it was distorted by the Earth's motion through space. And thus, Mickelson's apparatus only made it appear as if it was moving. In scientific parlance, this is a fallacy called petitio principii. That is, quote, and this is what it means, a fallacy in which a conclusion is taken for granted based on a majority support of the stated premise, a circular argument which begs the question. An example of petitio principii is the ongoing premise of physics and the movement of the earth. Quote, scientists say, and this is what it is that someone would say to me. Scientists say the earth spins at 1,039 miles an hour and circles our sun at 66,000 miles an hour. But then how do you know this? Well, because the sun is the center of our solar system and gravity does this. But how do you know this? Because all modern scientific data that I reference for validation of this fact says so. But how do they know? Well, because they're scientists. That is circular logic, and that's what we're dealing with when it comes to dealing with this particular subject. Now, there were scientists, great physicists, who took a serious look, and these were people who were Nobel laureates, who took a serious look at Mickelson's work, Michelson and Morley's work. Physicist Arthur Eddington, quote, there was just one alternative, and this is based on the experiment. The Earth's true velocity through space might happen to have been nil. Physicist Bernard Jaffe, quote, the data of Michelson-Morley were almost unbelievable. There was only one other possible conclusion to draw, that the Earth was at rest, end quote. Physicist Adolph Baker, thus the failure of Michelson-Morley to observe different speeds of light at different times of the year suggests that the Earth must be at rest. It was therefore the preferred frame for referencing absolute motion in space. Yet we have known since Galileo that the Earth is not the center of the universe. Then why should it be at rest in the first place? End quote. Physicist James Coleman, the easiest explanation was that the Earth was fixed in the ether and that everything else in the universe moved with respect to the Earth and the ether. Such an idea was not considered seriously, since it would mean, in effect, that our Earth occupied the omnipotent position in the universe, with all of the other heavenly bodies paying homage to it by moving around it, end quote. Historian Lincoln Barnett, forward written by himself, Adolf, I would say Adolf, because I don't want to play with his name, Albert Einstein. The Michelson-Morley experiment confronted scientists with an embarrassing alternative. On the one hand, they could scrap the ether theory, which had explained so many things about electricity, magnetism, and light. Or, if they insisted on retaining the ether, they had to abandon the still more venerable Copernican theory that the Earth was in motion. Too many physicists, it seemed, easier to believe that the Earth stood still than that electromagnetic waves could exist without a medium to sustain them. It was a serious dilemma, and one that split scientific thought for 1/4 of a century. Many new hypotheses were advanced and rejected. The experiment was tried again by Morley and others with the same conclusion. The apparent velocity of the Earth through the ether was zero, end quote. Physicist Richard Wilson, okay, what happened when the experiment was done in 1887? There was never, ever in the orientation at any time of the year, any shift in the interference pattern, none, no shift, no fringe shift, nothing. So what's the implication? That the experiment was done to measure the speed of the Earth's motion through the ether. This was an experiment that was 10 times more sensitive than it need to be. It could have detected speeds as low as 2 miles a second instead of the known 20 miles per second that the Earth has in its orbit motion around the sun. It did not detect it. What's the conclusion from the Michelson-Morley experiment? The implication is that the Earth is not moving. Physicist John D. Morton. Michelson and Morley found shifts in the interference fringes, but they were very much smaller than the size of the effect expected from the known orbital motions of the Earth, end quote. Physicist Douglas Giancola. This null result was one of the great puzzles of physics at the end of the 19th century. One possibility was that velocity would be zero and no fringe shift could be expected. But this implies that the Earth is somehow a preferred object. Only with respect to the Earth would the speed of light be c, as predicted by Maxwell's equation. This is tantamount to assuming that the Earth is the central body of the universe, end quote. By the way, Encyclopedia Britannica says of Einstein's early education that he showed little scholastic ability. That Britannica also says that at the age of 15, he was diagnosed with poor grades in history, geography, and languages. He left school without a diploma. Einstein himself wrote in school paper of his lack of imagination and practical ability. In 1895, Einstein failed to a simple entrance exam to an engineering school in Zurich. Then there's something called Foucault's pendulum, the way that they tried to get you to believe that the Earth was moving and somehow the pendulum was being affected by that movement. Astronomers used to hang pendulums from great ceilings to prove the spinning motion of the Earth, not accounting for the ball and socket joint that held that pendulum, which already facilitates a circular motion. If in fact the alleged constant motion of the Earth affected the pendulums in any way, then there should be no need to manually push start the pendulum into motion, which is that every time they tried that particular experiment, that's exactly what happened. In the Coriolis effect, there was a man by the name of Gaspard Gustave Coriolis. In the mid-19th century, he performed several experiments dealing with the effects of kinetic energy on rotating systems, which has become the mythologized proof of the heliocentric theory. This effect was said to cause sinks and toilet bowls in the northern hemisphere to drain spinning in one direction, while spinning in the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere. What really determines the direction in which your toilet flushes, enters, and leaves your sink or toilet are the shape of the bowl, the angle at which the water initially enters the bowl, and the force that pushes the water into the bowl. And lastly, ball Earth and air travel. Here's another thing very quickly. If the Earth were truly a ball or a sphere, airplane pilots would have to constantly correct their altitudes nose down so as not to fly straight off into outer space. If the Earth were truly a sphere, curving 8 inches per mile squared, a pilot wishing to simply maintain their altitude at a typical cruising speed of 500 miles per hour would have to constantly dip their nose downward and descend 2,777 feet every minute of the flight time, yet if the nose is not adjusted for. A plane flying at a typical 35,000 feet, wishing to maintain that altitude at the upper rim of the so-called troposphere, in 1 hour would find themselves 200,000 feet high into the mesosphere without their correction for the Earth's curvature. Without compensation for the curve, in 1 hour's time, the pilot would find himself 35.1 miles higher than expected. Some heliocentrics would argue that gravity magically keeps the airplanes at a perfect altitude around the curve, without any need for compensation of travel around the ball Earth. The round ball Earth is said to be spinning from west to east to greet the sun's rising every day. If the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour west to east, and the plane were to take off from California to New York, cruising at the same direction at 500 miles an hour, it would never be able to land, because the Earth below it would have been traveling much faster and at a faster rate of speed than the plane could actually catch up with it. And in closing, in the introduction of his book, The Mismeasure of Man by Stephen Gould, he says, science is a socially embedded activity. It progresses by hunch, vision, and intuition. Much of its charge or change through time does not record a closer approach to absolute truth, but an alteration of cultural contexts that influences it so strongly. Facts are not pure and unstudied bits of information. Culture also influences what we see and how we see it. Theories, moreover, are not inexorable inductions from facts. The most creative theories are often imaginative visions imposed upon facts, and the source of imagination is also strongly cultural. With that, I will close it out, and I will give you a 7 and 8 hour breakdown of the scientific principles of the flatted plane, not flat Earth. That's a misnomer. Flatted plane, and I hope that people who are out there will open their minds to understand that we have been living in the matrix and we've been duped up to this point.
All right.
Thanks for letting me know that, Billy. It was amazing hearing both perspectives back to back. That hits different from reading something on the internet than hearing both perspectives back to back was amazing. And I'm glad that we can express that in a mature fashion and not hate each other like how we see on the internet.
My love for you guys. You have to understand how I love you brothers and what you all are doing to advance the open mind of our people, you know?
Indeed.
Same here, man. Same here.
Indeed. There's many paths to the light. I'm an interviewer and I talk to so many people with so many different ideas and perspectives. It's great to have two brothers come on the show and just express their ideas about reality at the same time. That's amazing. I love this. This is amazing. We're gonna continue. We're gonna go on to the next question because I know we're pressed with time. Billy, whenever you have to leave, I know you got a flight to catch. Whenever you have to leave, just let me know because we're gonna keep rolling. I got some great questions for y'all. But whenever you got to go,
I'll try to hang out as long as I possibly can.
Hang out as long as you can, Billy, because tonight we got almost 4,000 people in the room, man. Tonight is one of them nights, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to hang out, man.
Listen, hey, Billy, Dr. Valentine, moving on. One of the most important things for us as a global community moving forward is what we call food. What we eat, what we ingest. And as we all know, for lack of better words, our food supply is kind of fucked up right now. So it's like, even, they say be vegan, but even if you're a vegan, there's so many tricks that they got for your vegan ass that it's all, they'll catch you either way. Whether you
That's why we recommend the Juice Plus.
Yeah. But listen,
that's why we recommend the Juice Plus.
Hey, this is what I want to ask y'all now.
Yeah.
So remember, the name of the show is Quantum Perspectives of God. We're thinking with a quantum mind now.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about food, we know food isn't just about what we eat. Food can also be what we listen to, what we see on television. Food can be a lot, what we ingest and take on as light. So I want to ask you this. Let me show you a picture. Let me show you this picture real quick.
Laboratory. They gave him water for a bath, and they would actually reweigh the water to make sure he wasn't drinking the bath water, right?
Yeah.
They would also make sure that the bath water wasn't disappearing other than what would normally be absorbed, maybe a little bit by the skin. They didn't give him he didn't drink water either. They didn't give him any water to drink. They gave him no food. 3 months. 3 months this man is in this laboratory. People are watching him, monitoring him, multiple cameras everywhere. He's only allowed to gaze at the sun for a few hours a day. And according to him, he said, I can live for hundreds of years in this body since he became this breatharian. This man is literally living off of photons. Is it possible to digest frequencies and somehow get them to sustain the body? Scientifically, I believe it's possible, because what do cells need to keep the body going? They need energy.
Yes.
Right? That's what it is. So when you're eating food, the food then creates, it breaks down, it's absorbed in through the cell wall, some of the nutrients, and those nutrients then give energy. Now, of course, there's various different nutrients, and so you would have to be able to balance all the hormones and nutrients. That would be very difficult to do. But in a future civilization with future technology or understanding, or maybe a more advanced way of consciousness, it could be possible that a person could absorb the frequencies of particular elements, and then the body would know how to convert that into what it needs to keep the mitochondria going, the power of the cell, the proper way to keep the body going. It's a hypothetical possibility, you know what I mean? So it's something that could happen. But after I seen Prowler's Johnny, I believe anything can happen.
Yeah, sure you're right. Sure you're right. The word you chose a beautiful word, Brother Rich. Quantum.
Yes.
The word means the smallest amount of a physical quantity that can exist independently. Now, the cymatics that most people speak about, we say here at our university, is the reverberating word of God. As the word made flesh. It's the word made flesh they talked about in John 1:1. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. What is emanating essentially is a blueprint for third density. And third density essentially is a kind of magnifying glass. The sun itself that hovers above us is only about maybe 4 to 5, maybe 6 to 8,000 miles above us. Most people talk about it being 93,000 miles away. That's not true. If you were to deal with the Masonic sextant and you see the rays of the light coming through the clouds, you would see that the clouds rays come to a particular point, and that point could be measured where that the sun is emanating that, as far as the diffusion of the light through the clouds. What we are actually light breathers, and we are water breathers. As water breathers, we think we're breathing oxygen, but we are not. We are breathing the plasmatic or the plasmatic tincture of the sun through the water that we call the atmosphere. And as we breathe it into our lungs, our bronchioles become the channels that essentially changes the water into wine, which is our blood. So that exchange at the end where the alveoli are is the part where Jesus Christ changes the water in making new vessels into new wine. So if the brother can actually breathe, we are breathing in. He's breathing in the solaric, what I call the direct menu of God. He's breathing in the solaric forces that has been titrated through the atmosphere that we call air or oxygen and so forth, nitrogen. This is a water medium that water breathers like ourselves are breathing in, and he is being nurtured by just simply breathing in the water that is what we breathe in, essentially. We only need water because we have to protect the cells against the crap that we eat. We need that constant, liquefying in order to protect the cells against the garbage that goes into us through what we breathe, through what we eat, what we drink. So we get thirsty, yes, and thirst actually happens when there is a destruction of cells, and the body calls for that. And the amount of sweating that we do nowadays because we want to get into the gym, we don't realize that we're sweating out nutrients. The ancestors at the time, back 10,000 years, they never sweated because that's almost like bleeding. And just
I've never heard of that, Doc. Sweating is like bleeding?
Yes, and crying was also, if you notice, the black, our melanated and indigenous children, the babies never cry. When the Europeans used to come in to indigenous places, they never found a crying baby. Only after they were destroyed, their civilization was destroyed. A crying baby, it means that the mother's not doing something, correctly. They had a I'm just before I turn the microphone back over. There was a documentary called it had to do with the civilization of Earth, the original civilization of Earth, and the French took a set of people over to Africa in order to study malnutrition. And what they found there were children that were being raised at 7 months were toilet trained. and had an ability to communicate with the mother without words, and were far more advanced than European children, and they wanted to know why. And they adopted that as it was the cradle of civilization was what it's called. It was on PBS, and they took that off. Why? Because black children at that time were so close to the mother. They've never left the mother's heat for the first year. And they were always somebody with their hands on that baby. And the white professors and the researchers found that the child was so advanced that they had at 1 year, at 11 months, they had the mastery of shapes down, and the mastery of being able to say language. The whole thing about us is that we have left our fundamental humanity, and we've adopted the Europeans' way of dealing in a hostile environment, because every environment he came from, he came up in a refrigerator, we came up in an incubator, and his refrigerator mentality is what we've been adapting, which is why we suffer the way we do.
I want to move on to the next question. Like I said, we're pressed with time. One of the things that we hear constantly in the New Age community, what we call the New Age community, because we forgot who we were and we're being lied to extensively, is the topic of gratitude. And they say gratitude, when you tap into gratitude is wonderful because it's a frequency of receiving. So when you're in a state of gratitude, you end up receiving more. And the more gratitude I display, the more I figure out, and I really feel it, I start getting more of that ish. You know what I'm saying? So gratitude is a wonderful frequency to experience and to display constantly. But the thing is, we're often appreciative for material things that we've manifested. Like, let's say a home. Let's say my son got accepted into a school. Let's say my business is doing well. Let's say I found a woman. Let's say a woman found a man. But one of the things that a lot of people don't give gratitude for, and this is interesting, is the empty space around the material objects. Now, Bobby